right, thanks, Galen. Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Kevin Ray. I'm relatively new to the team. This is my first time emceeing this, so bear with us, and we're going to walk you through kind of what's going on in the community and get some of your feedback here December 7th. So let's take a look, starting at what the agenda is we hope to cover today. So the goal, high level, is we're going to walk you through some of the metrics and point out a couple of wins that we had over the last time. Next, we're going to just recap what the 2022 goals were. So in the last session, Deep went into a lot of detail about what the metrics were around these goals. Feel free to go back and watch that recording. We're not going to talk about that at high level, mostly just a recap. So this is still on your radar for what we have planned. Then we're going to open up one of the FIPS that we spent a lot of time talking about to make sure that if there's any other conversations, you have plenty of time to give your feedback on it. After that, a couple new issues, problems that we found in the system, high-level data, and then turn it over to you if there's anything that you want to add. As a reminder, we post this to GitHub repos, so if you have any topics, any agendas that you want included, we'll always blast that out so you could see it. So with that, let's take a look at some of the metrics.
But first, sorry, K-Ray, we want to address an outstanding issue that has come to our attention before we jump into the metrics, just because I think it's probably on the mind of some of the notaries here on this call. It is brought to our attention that the Filecoin Plus registry app is currently experiencing technical difficulties loading any of the data. This has to do, we think, with some downstream effects to the recent network upgrade. One of the commands that is supposed to return an array, not. Various other people have come up with workarounds for their work streams. We're investigating what it is going to take to get the app back online. So we are aware, the development team is aware, it is frustrating, and it is a work in progress. We really hope to have more information by the end of today. So we'll see where we land. But if not, then we'll post more information in the Slack channel as we get it. So just wanted to pause and call that out. I would take questions, but honestly, I'm not going to have any more information for you on that front. So people can still send messages directly to Award DataCap through Lotus. It's a pain, but it is possible. So it's that. Yeah, Faye, I also commented on yours about your address change issue. When I check that address and verify, it still shows that there is DataCap. So I'm not sure where the address no longer being verified comes from. So I don't know if anyone else has other evidence or experience of their address suddenly not being verified. If so, let us know about that so we can try and see if there's a pattern there. Okay, kicking it back to K-Ray for metrics.
Hey, thanks, Galen. So we show this slide every week. I just wanted to highlight one big change that we noticed from the last call on the 23rd to today. And that's for the first time, we've actually got that average time to data cap below 2 days. So we're just going to kind of take a moment, smile a little bit off this milestone that we're now below that 2-day mark. And the other thing to just kind of highlight as you look at this slide or you listen to this, it's that our amount of data cap for the first time has grown above that petabyte mark. So really fun numbers to see as we come into the end of 2021. And one of the things that we're going to be working on to get ready is kind of like a year in review for the metrics as we look at what do we do for 2021 and where do we see that growth. So it'll be a fun project as we kind of come on board. So with that, Galen, Deep, anybody in the community, do you have any questions or any additionals on the metrics? Sweet. All right, then let's take a look at what's happening on our repo boards here. So just as a check-in on that, right now we have 27 open issues, which is great. That seems to be about the average for the last few months. And in the last week, we've had 11 new applications. Again, this is right on average, which is nice to see that the holidays really aren't changing that much as far as the community going. The last 7 days, we've had 15 new applications, which brings our total up to 273. If I had to draw your attention to anything on this slide, it's that we have seen no dramatic shift. So there wasn't a drop off, there wasn't a sharp increase. This is pretty much par for the course as we go forward on that. With that, I'll kind of pause again if there's any questions about the screen. Wonderful. All right, let's take a look at what our goals are for 2022. So again, we talked about this in a lot of detail, as Galen mentioned in the chat. Feel free to go back and watch that YouTube if you want to see how we're going to measure these and really an in-depth that Deep's provided. But just to kind of keep this top of mind before we go into the holidays and before we come into 2022, these 5 things are like where we plan to focus, like on our high level goals. So 1 is get that volume up around 500 petabytes. 2 is that time to onboarding speed. So we just talked about going from 2 days to 1 day. Let's see how much lower we can get that time to kick off. Then the risk mitigation, making sure that we have analysis on chain for like who's actually using it. We don't have any shady things. We call it sus. And so making sure that that sus goes way down. And then the experience that you have as a client when you start to onboard, making sure that our documentation, our FAQs, our videos, trying to make this as like low lift as possible. Yeah, Galen's typing sus among us. I like that. And then lastly, we're going to have some elections coming up. So like, what does our governance process look like as a community? And we talk about this for like interviews, surveys. So again, at a high level, if you were to take anything away, it's like making sure there's more data on this system, making sure that that data is safe and not suspect, and then making sure that the UI is like really friendly for you guys and people that are coming on board. So with this, feel free to check in with us. We'll probably keep you accountable as to where we progress on these, but this is just a high level of where we stand. Any questions from you guys about this? Rock. Well, let's take a look at our next issue, which was 204 from last week. So out of all the times that we dedicated for the call, this 204, when I went back and watched the video, it accounted for maybe 50% of the call. And I realized in that sometimes other people are talking, you might not get a chance. So just consider this like the return, the part 2, the continuation, open discussion as far as this 204 for what you might want to bring up. And I think if we had to put the ribbon on it, is based off the feedback that we got on the calls, on the FIP itself, the moving forward plan is going to be for that data cap allocation, like taking that back. The plan will be 2 notaries and 1 root key holder. So I wanted to follow up and make sure that there was no concerns, or maybe just get that friendly +1. So this would be a great time if you wanted to unmute or raise a hand or comment in the chat and say, yes, love this plan, or you can write back, no strong feelings, whatever you guys want to do. Or feel free to be like, this is the silliest plan I've ever seen in my life, and I want to give some impact. So I kind of pause and looking for feedback or thoughts.
We want to call out that, like, are we moving forward with needing one of the notaries to be the same notary that gave DataCap to the client, or no? Because I can see cases in which that would be valuable, and then there's other cases in which that could create stopgaps in the solution and bad incentives as well. And so I'd love to hear thoughts.
Gut reaction sounds like it'll cause more problems than it'll solve, just because that notary might be offline. So like if somebody is abusing their data cap and that notary is offline for a week, we just leave them abusing it for another week. So if the point of this is to quickly react to mistakes with data cap allotment, I don't think that that would be helpful.
Yeah, I also agree. I like the idea of trying to have a cultural ideal process where we try and ask the notary who assigned it to sign this message. But if they are not available, like, I don't think that it should be a blocker. One thing that has been discussed is this idea of a multi-sig of multi-sigs, where we would basically create, two from column A, 2 from column B. I think one of the things that would be interesting is like, what happens in in a more extreme case where there's some kind of flagrant bad behavior, and we're not getting two notaries to reply within a day, is there some additional mechanism where two root key holders could override this decision if the message isn't getting approved? But I don't think that we're at that point. And I think that historically what we have seen is getting root key holders to sign is slower than notaries overall. So I don't think that necessarily solves it.
Plus, Kid, I saw you come off mute. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
So it sounds like we're not hearing any like strong dissenting opinions. Again, this FIP is available for people to comment on and share. I think our next step here is we will probably, we'll talk about it again this afternoon and see. But then if we don't hear anything in Slack channels or on the FIP or in the afternoon call, then we'll sort of move forward with making a recommendation in the content of that, that we think the specific mechanism would be two notaries, ideally one of which being the notary who initially awarded the data cap, but not a hard-coded requirement, and one root key holder as the kind of threshold design. Cool.
Sweet. Just consider this like just the friendly community housekeeping. So we put this on the last. I'm just going to keep carrying this forward. I'm going to update the calendar when it gets a little bit closer. But January 4th, we're going to take a break. That's focus on getting everything set up on your side, hug your friends and family, and just take that moment. There will be no calls on both the 8 and 4 Pacific time zones with that. The first call of 2022 will be January 11th. So you'll see a calendar update with that shortly. So just a friendly reminder, you'll see some calendar updates. Another just keep you in the loop from a community standpoint is we've been talking about this idea of some type of a scoreboard, a leaderboard, where you can actually visually see how you're doing as a notary and ranking up against everyone else. How long's the time? What's the response? How is your participation? So we're just finalizing the drafts for the RFP. We're going to submit this out to the community. So as soon as that RFP is public, we're going to put that in the repo. So if there's an engineering or development firm that you're aware of or that you want to recommend, please solicit that. But that bid will be going out probably this week. And then we hope to get the work started on that right around the holidays. And the goal is to get that notary scoreboard, leaderboard, whatever Atari, Nintendo reference you want to have up as early as possible in 2022 and then have that on board. So just consider that just a friendly update, just keeping you in the loop of one of those other things behind the scenes taking place. Love the chat. Yes, definitely get the dinner with Danny. All right, great. I think we have one more slide here and then we can kind of open it up for discussion. So Galen, do you want to kick us off with this?
Yeah, so I posted a discussion here, discussion topic 327, sort of asking the question, when we approved issue 217 for this new LDN process, we sort of wrote it saying that this was going to be an experiment to see how well this process worked. And again, just like a reminder of sort of the changes, rather than waiting for 7 notaries to jump in and say yes, and then creating the LDN and then creating a multi-sig of 7 with that threshold of 4. What we did instead was have, once the client submits a valid application, the governance team like quickly approves it, the root key holders create it, and all of the notaries are on that multi-sig with a threshold of 2. So we increased the automation, we decreased the threshold, with the hope being, can we increase speed and efficiency for these large clients? When we wrote this out, we said that it was going to be an experiment for 100 petabytes. And we are pretty much hitting 100 petabytes of large data set clients that have received at least one allocation. So the question here, checking in with everyone, are there any strong concerns, arguments, or ideas for changes to this process that need to happen in the immediate future before we kind of continue moving forward? There are definitely things that we are still working on that are, various improvements. But really the question is around, like, do we feel very strongly that we need to make a change this month? Something that can take, becomes an extreme prioritization, or is it changes to the process that require sort of more investigation and proposal? Really, this is around, like, do we shut off the LDN process because we hit the 100 petabyte limit, or do we keep it running? Pausing.
I want to say something. LDN has been a great help of me, helping me sending out deals. I've been able to send out like 30 terabytes to 50 terabytes per day. It's been great of helping community members to build their power quickly. I can get lots of testimonials on that. I think the only issue I'm having is the renewal process happens fairly quickly. It's every 200 terabytes. I can finish that in a few days and have to trace down notaries to sign it again. If it can be increased again, that would be more helpful. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so with that, like, we have seen multiple clients where they anticipated what their weekly usage would be, but their actual weekly usage was faster. And so we just changed their weekly usage, which then recalculates those allocation quantities. So it is possible to just change, to go from 100 terabytes a week to 200 a week, which would mean that 200% of your weekly would be 400 terabytes of DataCap per allocation, right? So, so it is possible to increase that weekly rate, which is not necessarily connected to the changes proposed in 217. One of the questions that came out of the discussion around 217 was like, should we change how those allocations are calculated entirely? And this proposal didn't really take into scope those stepwise allocation changes. So I think that's sort of like a longer, broader conversation around, like, do we want to get rid of that allocation plan entirely? Do we want to restructure it? Do we want it to be, every LDN just gets 100 terabytes? Once they have used 75, they get another 100, and it's the same for every client, no matter how quickly they use it. Do we, there's a lot of ways we could do that. Those were not covered in this issue, but I appreciate, like, bringing up what's working and what's not working. So specifically, we can change the weekly amount, and that will change your allocation to this time. Andrew, you have some ideas, opinions, and concerns here. Do you want to talk on those?
So we have an allotment, and we've gone through the process of getting the renewal a few times. And we just hit some pain points that, if the notaries weren't super helpful and working on weekends and everything, it would have actually, we did actually stop the production system for a period of time. So, but it would have been worse. And in like any sort of customer facing, like end user facing system, that's like not an option. So like you can't shut down an app because your storage system is not working, or so anyway, I just feel like I just felt like we could improve the allotments to be much more buffered, so that a user like myself will basically never hit the bottom of that barrel, and never actually be close to hitting the bottom of that barrel as long as they're still applying. Yeah, so that's that.
Yeah, so on this one, like this is just where the README is out of date, because it should be when they have used 75%, the subsequent allocation bot kicks off.
Yeah, so that's cool. We can change that, but 75 is still too low. So let's see, so 75 would be like 2 days. So in any production system where you see the end of your storage being 2 days away, you're not going to use that system anymore, you know?
So 75% remaining from a 200% allocation is 2 days.
So 14 days.
Yeah, it's a quarter of 2 weeks basically, right? Which if you take a working week of 10 days, that's 2.5 days theoretically.
So then couldn't this also be solved by upping the weekly rate?
Let's see. Yeah, so I did down below change the wording to being 400% of your weekly data cap.
But what I'm saying is like just change. What if you just changed like how much you're using in a week?
Well, sorry, isn't when I apply and you ask me what I'm using in a week, shouldn't I state what I'm going to use in a week, not multiply it by some factor?
But what it sounds like is that what you are using in a 5-day week is greater than what is being reported as the weekly usage, or is that not correct?
That's not correct. This is just the math. So just the math of if you have 100% allotment for a week, right now, if it's 75% of that 200 of 2 weeks, that puts me at less than 3 days, basically less than 3 days before I see the bottom. And our notary response time is about that. So that means that a lot of projects will hit the bottom. So, and so either you could change the wording and make it not about what your weekly spend will be, because all I'm saying is like, you're saying, oh, why don't we just increase your weekly usage? Well, I'm not increasing the weekly usage. The weekly usage is the same. So we could change that wording to be something else and increase it, or we could increase what the allotment actually is as a percentage of that weekly usage. And so I'm just saying here, if we doubled that, that would at least give me a week. I would actually say quadruple it, like 800%, and make sure people are never like 2 weeks from the end of their storage system would be much safer. But I'm just trying to go, step by step.
Yeah, no, so it sounds like both you and Faye are advocating really around the same issue, which is the allocation calculation plan. And not around the like 23 notaries on multi-sig with a threshold of 2. You're talking about the allocation plan, which is great. I want to talk about those things. And it sounds like that is a pain point for people that are using this process. That fundamentally was not in scope for 217. So I just want to like pull this back a step and say that like when we wrote 217, we said we would check in at 100 petabytes. So we're checking in, and it sounds like the next thing to fix, because when we fixed 217, I would argue that the large data set process was not working for a variety of reasons, including like how long it took to get 7 notaries and then the thresholds and all of that. So it sounds like the changes we made in 217 are helping. The next changes we need to make are around the allocation calculation scale. But from what I'm hearing right now, we don't need to change aspects of the way that we create the multi-sig, the threshold that is required, and we are comfortable continuing to use this process, but we want to make some changes to make the subsequent allocation process better. But we're not saying there's a significant problem and we need to stop doing what we're doing. We just need to make more improvements. Is that correct?
Good for me. Yeah, I do have a comment down below. I don't. You're gonna have to judge whether this one is relevant or not. Oh, maybe I didn't fire it off. Or no, there it is.
Yep.
So basically, I'd argue even stronger that we should go more into this process. So I think it is working, and we need it even more as the default.
Yeah. Yes. Again, love these like improvement directions, and want to keep making improvements. But also, it sounds like we're at a place where we are happy to keep making improvements because fundamentally we think that the improvements made in 217 helped. And then Faye has, yes, some questions about allocations. Okay, so what we, just like tying a bow on discussion topic 327, oops. From this call, currently no immediate concerns that say we need to stop running the LDN process the way that we're running it, only ideas for how we can increase the effectiveness of the LDN process. Julian, did you have? Oh, okay, sorry. All right, we already mentioned this. Plus.phil.org is having a login issue where the app says something went wrong and then is not loading any of the arrays. It's a royal bummer, and we're working on it. That's that. Wrapping that, we can then go into open discussion if we wanted. It sounds like there's definitely some like discussion hunger around what the LBN allocation plan could be. What I'm hearing is don't change the way people calculate their weekly rate, keep that as accurate as possible, but increase the percentage. So basically, what if the first allocation is 100% of their weekly rate, second allocation 200, third allocation 400, and we just make that small change. My question here as a flag is I have seen a number of questionable LDNs come in where they are claiming to represent someone and that they will be onboarding 200 tebibytes a week, but they're totally new to the community. Is that my concern here? My fear with like saying the first allocation is 100% of weekly is that people can just, you know, blow up, get a first allocation of 200 tebibytes and then disappear. And how does that impact our metrics and the network? And, you know, do we feel that that's safe enough to try? Part of the reason the first allocation is low is that then gives a forcing function of that person has to make some good deal-making behavior to come back and get a subsequent allocation. So thoughts on, you know, ways to have better diligence?
We could also not sacrifice the first half week and still get to 400%, right? Because right now we taper off at the third successful allocation. We could just taper off at the fourth successful allocation as well. But that doesn't, that still doesn't address Faye's point on like maybe the first one is still too small. So I think that's still, I just don't want to conflate the two things, I guess. Because there's one part of this, which is support 4 weeks of stuff because 2 weeks is too little to take a production bet, which I think is very reasonable. And then there's this other angle, which is even just getting started might be too slow of a ramp curve. So how do we want to address that? Or are we in support or not in support, or claiming necessary or not necessary kind of thing?
Pausing here to see if there are any other thoughts, and then just wait like another minute, and then we'll kick it to PlusKit to share their project. So to see if there are other thoughts or opinions on sort of the large data set allocation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Doris from PlusKit, and very happy to share our project PlusKit with all of you. Could I share my screen? Okay.
Yes. You are now a co-host, and you should be able to share your screen.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. PlusKit is a Field plus Eco tools platform. It is committed to providing ecological participants with functional, operational, and rich types of tools to reduce the difficulty for users to participate in ecology, and also enhance the convenience for developers and other users, and thereby increase the activity and for the ecosystem. And also, PlusKit is open to the whole community and could be used by anyone without signing up. Since it was very new, only one version has been launched. This version mainly provides the data for DataCap for general verification. The homepage, you can see the homepage mainly contains 3 parts, namely search, dashboard, and ranking. We can show you about our website. Okay, this is our website. You can see at the search entry, it provides.
Oh, you may need to switch which screen you're sharing, because we still see the PowerPoint and not the browser window. So you might have to like stop and share the other browser window. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Can you see now? Can you see now?
No, we see the version 0.1 slide. Yeah, we see what to get from PlusKit.
How about now?
Still just seeing PowerPoint. You may need to stop the share and then reshare your browser window.
Yes, I opened our website via browser, but I'm not sure whether you can see.
Yeah.
No.
Here, give me 1 second.
Is it?
So
Yeah.
Here's the browser view. So I'm going to
Yeah.
stop sharing. And now if you hit share screen, it should let you select your browser.
Okay, I will stop sharing from the browser and only from the PowerPoint. Okay. Can you? It's all right. I will stop it and try again.
So hi Doris, I think I can help you about the sharing problem. So
Yeah.
your motherland is Chinese, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. 就是在那个sorry guys, I need to use the Chinese. 你用共享的时候，点击共享，它会有很多窗口，然后你可以选择把共享的从你的 PowerPoint 换成你的网页。
我现在就用网页吧，因为那个刚才尝试一下那个不行。你们现在能看到、
要么你就把它就不是分享窗口，就是分享你整个的屏幕。这样你这个屏幕上，你把你的网站打开，你就也能看到。
我现在分享那个 PPT 算了，就是不分享那个网页了。
OK。
你们能看到那个 PPT 吗？
可以的。
好嘞。Hi, hello. I will stop. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I decided to stop sharing the browser from the website while browser and only use the PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I will continue. Okay. At our homepage, there are mainly three parts, namely the search and the dashboard and the ranking. At the search entry, it provides the trial of a Notary, a storage provider, and the clients. It will be faster by classified search. And the search, the second part is a dashboard. In this part, there are many some statistics data, including the number of global notaries, the total amount of DataCap, etc. These data are updated every 24 hours. And the third part is the ranking. And here it mainly includes the lottery, storage provider, and clients. Each has a default metrics. And in addition, you can get some detailed information by checking certain areas. These are the three parts on our homepage. The next one, you may also know what you can get from our product. So I decide. So I will tell you one by one. First of all, for ecological participants, PlusKit can help you take an overview of both DataCap and the notaries, including global distribution status and allocation progress. Regarding the DataCap, it includes the times and the amount of the data allocation in the past 7 days, the proportion of allocated and unallocated status, and the regional distribution of global DataCap. In the statistics section, some important data displays are also included. This is the first part. And for the notary, it includes the number of notary in each area, the total amount of their granted and allocated data cap, and the allocation time of each of them. By the way, we also update this information regularly on our Twitter and Slack. Next, PlusKit is also very helpful to notary. It can help the notary to clearly know the usage frequency and the storage ratio of clients. In this way, private transaction can be effectively avoided. You can see this is the flow direction of each data where that clients store their data on each miners. Finally, for clients and storage providers, namely the miners, PlusKit can also be very helpful. On the one hand, clients can better know the notary by checking and ranking the allocation records of them, so that they can choose more suitable notaries for application. On the other hand, clients can quickly find providers with strong storage capability by checking the ranking and storage records of storage providers. At the same time, good storage providers can also get more storage resources by accumulating storage experience. Okay, that's all about my sharing. May I get your feedback about our product? Or do you have any problem?
Yeah, this is looking great. Are there some questions from other notaries on the call?
Or may I get your feedback?
Are you, Sally, are you in the Slack channel, the Phil Plus Slack channel?
Slack, I'm sorry, Slack channel.
Yeah, let's see. Let me get the link.
I got it here.
Okay.
Yes, we have Slack channel. And I will show you this. You can get in touch with us about these 3 channels.
Great.
You can, yes, these are Slack channel and these are Twitter. Both are PlusKit official.
I think the only feedback I have right now would be putting those on the website. Your Slack and your Twitter handle on the website, or like an about or a contact. So that then if other notaries or community members have questions, they can contact you.
Thank you. It's our first time to attend this meeting, so a little bit nervous.
This is
Thank
great.
you.
Really appreciate it. Awesome work. I really like the art style. I think it's really well done website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think in the previous call, actually, Julian had a question on how the average time or the efficiency was being calculated. I don't know if you got a response to that, Julian, or if we should ask them to clarify today. I think maybe it's worth chatting about. Yeah, Sally, if you don't mind, you have this number for each notary, you have an average time. how do you measure the start and the finish for that?
They are from the GitHub, and some of the data are from the blockchain.
Cool. So then for the GitHub, I assume it's when the issue is created to when the data cap is given.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I'd add to that, love the presentation, love the file. I just found you on Slack. I'm going to send you a DM and maybe loop in Galen. And we know that you had a micro grant coming, so maybe have some additional questions. I'd love to probe your brain about that leaderboard that you were talking about. So you might hear from us. You definitely will be hearing from us on Slack. Thank you.
Awesome. 8 minutes before the time. Were there other questions or presentations?
All right, Galen, I think that silence means that they are filled with knowledge.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. Thanks, everybody. Boom. Recording starting. Notary governance call, the second of the day, December 7th. K-Ray, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Galen. Well, hello, Meg, Jonathan, Charles, anybody watching this recording. My name's Kevin Ray with the Foundation, and today is the December 7th Notary Governance meeting. So let's take a look high level at what we kind of have planned for this call. So what we hope to cover is, first off, just a really high level quick review of the metrics, point out 2 really fun kind of milestones for you. Then we're going to highlight just a quick little recap of the Phil Plus board from Galen. We're going to just do a recap of what the 2022 goals are. We went into this detailed last week. This week will just be a quick summary. Then we're going to talk about FIP 204. We had a lot of discussion on this last time, just making sure that there's any final review before we send this off on a recommendation. We're going to remind you of some of the dates coming up for 2022. Then we have a couple new discussion topics on allocation and going forward with that. So before we get into it, Galen, do you want to kind of highlight the big issue anybody might be curious about?
Yeah, so it was brought to our attention that the Phil Plus registry app is currently experiencing some technical issues when you try to sign in as a notary or root key holder with your Ledger wallet. You'll get an error that says something went wrong, and then it'll just kind of be spooling as it tries to count approved notaries, and the tables below don't populate. The dev team is aware of that. We're looking into it. We think that it has something to do with the most recent network upgrade and a change that was made to how a certain command was returning an array, and now it is not. So we're aware, we're digging in, and hopefully we have more better news soon. We have been kind of posting and tracking that in the Notaries discussion channel. So you are still able to send messages directly through Lotus to approve and award DataCap. It is not a friendly front-end user experience, but it does function. So that's where we are. Hopefully we'll have more information in the next day or so.
let's take a quick look at metrics. So we showed this slide. We showed this slide 2 weeks ago. I have two boxes around something just to hopefully draw your eye to. The first was the average time to DataCap. This is a big, just everyone pat yourself on the back because we just hit under 2 days. So we're starting to reach towards that milestone. Galen literally doing it right now. Thank you. And yeah, so congratulations. We fell into that 2-day mark, and just one of our goals is to get that going down even more. The second is the total amount of data cap used by clients. Another milestone. We went over the petabyte mark. So program is doing great. I think that we're off to like a good 2021, and this really kind of sets the stage for what are we looking at for 2022. So put in any questions in the voice or feel free to drop them in Slack. Let's take a look at what we have scheduled for 2022 as a community and goals lining up. So what we have right here is a summary, sorry, jumping ahead a little bit, of what's open in our GitHub issues right here. So I think if I was to draw just any kind of summary from what you're looking at right now, is that we're just kind of in line with like what's been the average for the last couple of weeks. So we have 27 current issues. Last week was around that same number. We have 11 new applications. That was around the same that we had 2 weeks ago. And we have 15 in the last week of like those granted applications. The reason I'm calling this out was because in the States, it was Thanksgiving. We have the holidays coming up for the Christmas. Everybody celebrates. So just kind of calling this that we're still kind of seeing this momentum carry forward, which is a great thing. So we're kind of watching this, making sure that this holds tight, and keeping an eye through the holidays here. Now onto that goal. So we have these big 5 focuses that we're really looking at as we launch into 2022. And on the last call, Deep really walked us through how he saw the milestones and how he was going to weight them. So if you're curious for a recap on that, the YouTube link is posted from the last Notary governance call on the 23rd. So just as a high level, these are the 5. Number 1, get that volume up. So right now we talked about being over 100. Now we're looking at that 500 mark. That's a big jump, and we're looking at that volume to go through the network. The second is how fast we can make that speed. So right now we just talked about how our metric is right below the 2 days. The goal for 2022 is get that below 1 day. So we're going to really work hard on that speed that turns around. The next is really mitigating that risk that we have in the network. One of the terms I had never heard before joining was sus. So I guess that's short for suspect if you're really busy. And Galen is always a fan of pointing these out. This looks super sus. So finding more of those sus as we come in the network is going to be a big, yep, sus as we look at 2022 and finding those out. And then number 4 is how do we make this process super, super simple? So thinking about onboarding, documentation, really writing this down so that anybody who's new to the program doesn't really have to come into it with a level of really deep understanding. We're really looking for like building this out and documenting it. The 5th and final is this governance process that we're all taking part of right now, this ownership of the community. So more elections, more feedback, more scalability, and mature networks. So those are the big 5. Just a quick recap. If there's something that you'd like to see that isn't on this list, that's why we're having this call. Let us know. If there's something that should be here, this is our project. Let's all voice it. So put in any questions in this chat or live. We'll kind of take a look at what we have coming up. Great. So I think all 3 of you were on the call last 2 weeks ago. If not, forgive me. And this is a quick introduction. This FIP has been posted for a few weeks. And on the last call, we spent a good 40% of the call talking about it. So I wanted to bring this up as one last opportunity to kind of voice what feedback we've got collected and make sure that you're tracking it. And 2, offer you a final opportunity for any kind of thoughts you have before we kind of take this recommendation back to that FIP. So if you remember, this was the issue about what do we do if we're going to revoke that data cap, and like how do we manage data cap once it's been allocated to anybody on the Notary network. So on the last slide that we had a couple of different options, like 2 root key holders, and we talked about this in a lot of detail. After looking at the FIP, after taking feedback from both calls, what we have highlighted here was the plan that got the most traction, where we got the most positive thumbs up and people thought was the most scalable. And as a quick recap on this plan moving forward, what it would mean is that we would have 2 notaries and 1 root key holder would make that decision on if that data would be then removed. Now, there was a couple questions that came up in the morning call, like what if that notary was part of it? And this is part where like, it's probably good for a conversation. So I'm going to hand this over to Galen right now to kind of maybe talk about any of the intricacies on the level that he has that I don't. So Galen, do you want to elaborate on this a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been brought up a few times was this question around, is there a responsibility that the notary who awarded the data cap in the first place be involved in this revoking? And I think one of the, where we're landing is that we don't want that to be a blocker on the ability to revoke data cap. So if that was the requirement, and for example, that notary just happened to be away, unreachable, not responsive, even for a number of days, we don't want a situation where we have identified, fraudulent behavior, but we can't, do anything about it because we're waiting for a response from one specific particular notary. So rather, what we are leaning towards as a community proposal is that we would like to encourage the inclusion of that notary. So in this process, when when it is brought up, whatever the specific platform, probably GitHub for the discussion, that we would try and invite that notary to be one of the two, but that it wouldn't be a requirement. And so that would allow us to still draw on the pool of all of the active notaries plus one root key holder to kind of push through a message to revoke data cap from someone. See a hand from Meg.
Hiya, Galen. Yeah, my question is, how are we going to detect, is it going to be a bot that's detecting that it's unused data cap? Because I think isn't this connected to the function that we're meant to do, which is we approve it and therefore we've got to check that it's been used appropriately. So who's picking it up if it's not the notary, one of the notaries that allocated it?
So this FIP is just, do we want to change the protocol to add a command that allows for the removal of data cap?
Okay.
It is not necessarily what are all of the specific reasons why you would remove data cap, which is more of what you're asking. So one of the things that has been talked about are like, why would we remove data cap? One example is it's not being used. It has become stale. And that may be a combination of a bot that looks at, when the data cap was awarded. There's still other questions that would have to be worked out to the effect of right now, when data cap is allocated, let's say there is a client, they get an allocation over here from notary A for 5 tebibytes. They get a second allocation over here from notary B for another 5 tebibytes, and they go and they make 2 deals for 2.5 tebibytes. The deal itself is not tracking to say, well, that 2.5 tebibytes came from this person and this 2.5 came from this person. So if they make a deal, they make 2 deals for 2.5 tebibytes, they have 5 tebibytes of data left, something happens, they need to revoke it. We can't accurately say their remaining 5 tebibytes came from this notary if those 2 allocations came in at the same time. This is all just like a complicated example that says we don't necessarily connect the actual amount of data cap that is used in a deal all the way back to the notary who allocated it. So what we would need to do is say things like, if a client address receives data cap and does not receive more data cap and does not make deals for a certain amount of time, then we could determine that that was stale. That might be one way that we write kind of that rule. The FIP here is really just saying, do we want a tool to be able to remove data cap at all?
I understand.
Yeah.
I think I was more just asking who's policing it, who's detecting it, but it really should be automated is probably, if that's where we're headed, that'd be great.
Yeah, we would want to be able to automate as much of those, the actions with which we need to then remove the data cap to begin with. So those might be fraudulent behavior. How do we automate and indicate fraudulent behavior? We're working on those questions. They might be stale data cap, and might be, other behaviors that we want to write rules for. As many of those that we could build automated, unambiguous, clearly transparent, auditable tools, the better.
Great.
So with that, are there other sort of questions, comments, strong opinions about this? I think Deep will actually be sort of authoring parts of this FIP. And once that's available, we'll be kind of broadcasting it in Slack, and people can go signal boost it there. We'll just wait a second. Okay, cool. K-Ray?
Yeah, just file this under just a housekeeping slide / update. The first is that we're going to be removing the notary governance call that's scheduled for January 4th. We're treating this as like a holiday block. So spend time with your friends and family, read over all the GitHub repos that you've been behind on, and just take that time to get set. Because on January 11th, the new schedule for 2022 kicks off. So we'll be updating the calendar. We'll be sending you some direct pings if you come to these, and we're just really looking forward to 2022 kicking off. But if you're like me and you live and die by your calendar, you will see that change. So no worry to write that on a sticky note. This will be updating just a friendly going forward. The other second thing is that we're looking at incorporating all of the work that you do and what we're calling like a scoreboard. And we mentioned this kind of scope on the last call, and we're wrapping up the RFP drafts now. The goal of this will be a public-facing scoreboard, leaderboard, whatever Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo insert score that you want to have on this. And the goal is that we can kind of see in a visual basis, what's the participation like for each notary? How long is their length for approval? What's the communication like on GitHub? Coming to these meetings? All these really play a part in how we're serving the community. And so we want to have a way that we can kind of demonstrate and show this going forward. So we're really looking forward to kind of having some updates that come through on this one. If you want to watch the sync from this morning, we had a guest join us and they kind of gave a demo from like another display that they're working on. So we might see a lot come from the community. We might see this RFP specifically address it, but just keeping you in the loop because you might see this come out and it's going to be a really fun way to kind of keep a score on this one. So before we go on, if there was any questions about the schedule or this upcoming scoreboard, love to hear them. Otherwise, we'll slide right into the discussions. Feel free to come back to this. When we go to the next, let's take a look at the last two issues that we had to flag for you and a new Slack channel. So, Galen?
Sweet. So kicked off this discussion topic number 327. Fell a little bit behind here on this, but as we've sort of been posting and updating in our progress towards Q1, we're getting close to 100 petabytes of data cap at the top of the funnel for large data sets. When we pushed through proposal 217 many moons ago, part of it was we said we would check in when this process hit 100 petabytes and just see how we're feeling on the experiment. And so just as a quick recap of sort of the scope of this proposal and kind of the question that we're asking here, the changes to that were coming through in that proposal really were around the beginning of the process. So the client submits the app, the governance team approves it, the root key holders create the multi-sig. At that time, that was a major change. We put all notaries on it with a threshold of 2. That was a major change. And then some other small changes around increasing bot activity and kicking off subsequent allocations at 75% sealed in deal. So we're not really talking here about what are the other ideas and changes that we want to make going forward. The question is not so much like, what is still not working, because we have ideas around things. We've heard some great feedback. Andrew Hill talked this morning about some of them specifically, and also Faye Yan with he has a couple of LDNs. He advocated very strongly for continuing the process and also brought up some of his pain points. Both of those individuals as clients had pain points really around the size of the allocations and how can we get the allocation size higher so that they have more runway for situations like what we're seeing today, where the app is not functioning and their business is reliant on this data cap, right? That's not what we want to discuss here on this specific issue. I really just want to check in and make sure from the community. We said we were going to check in on this process when it hit 100 petabytes, mostly around, is it still a functioning experiment as it's determined, or do we need to pull an emergency brake and stop the LDN process because we have identified that the changes we made are not functioning and not safe. So really it's just, are there any strong concerns, arguments, or ideas for changes that we need to make kind of right now this week? So pausing here to see how everyone on the call feels about that.
So I think Galen, I think these changes have been effective, but there's, as you said, there's a whole heap of other discussions and issues, and I think it's probably time to prioritize those.
Yep. Yeah, we know there are a number of other things that need to continue to be iterated upon, which we're excited to do. And, Deep and K-Ray and I have been getting some really exciting work happening on some of those fronts. So mostly just making sure that no one in the community thinks, this process has gone off the rails and has somehow created a threat vector to the network that is a blind spot that I'm not seeing because I'm too close to it or something like that. So
yeah, understand. Yeah. No, I think there's been process improvements, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So.
All right. With that, the other thing that we put here on the slide, we mentioned at the top of the call, there's a login issue with plus.phil.org, working towards resolution. Really bummed about it. As K-Ray mentioned in the call earlier, Sally from PlusKit came and presented their dashboard. We showed this dashboard 2 weeks ago in a call, and they kind of talked through how they're getting some of their metrics, what they're working on. So it's very exciting. Additionally, this kind of spurred the idea for us to stand up a new public Slack channel. So that's the Phil-Plus-Dashboards. So if you have questions about how we're doing data analytics, if you want to be more involved in those dashboard conversations, we're trying to get, as we're now at 4 different community dashboards, we want to get a forum where anyone can ask, you're reporting this metric, how exactly did you calculate that percentage? Because over here, we're seeing something different. So we just want to get a place where that conversation can happen. It's on the public channel, it's open to everybody. So tell your data analytics friends to come over and party in Slack with us. Deep, anything to add about that?
Sounds great. Thank you
Great.
for adding the channel. I just want to say that it is public, and that means that anybody that's interested in asking questions on how the dashboards work or engaging those teams, building your own stuff, consuming their APIs for other interesting use cases you might have, you should join that and ask those questions. Like, should function more as like our like data analytics and dashboards working group for Filecoin Plus. So excited to see more people in there.
And there's the link to that. Kara, I think that was all of the agenda that we had. So at this point, we can turn it over open discussion, other questions, comments, concerns from the community on what's happening in the state of Filecoin Plus.
I guess my questions, Galen, were what were some of the discussion points from this morning?
Deep.
I was just gonna flag that I think we spent a little bit of time in general, like with Andrew talking about efficiencies in the process and like LDNs in general and support for like larger scale LDNs in a way that won't impact. I think the real scenario is actually deal brokers, Meg. So like cases like Textile, Bitbot, or Estuary, which are themselves like a massive funnel for clients, like needing bigger tranches effectively. And so like today we have this thing that's like 200% of the weekly allocation rate is like the theoretical maximum of DataCap you can get at any point in time from an LDN. But the point being made was for like a production grade deal broker service, 2 weeks of runway is not enough to make like an enterprise bet. Like we should be talking about 4 weeks, 8 weeks, like much bigger numbers than 2 weeks. And so how do we increase the upper maximum? Like, can we at least go to 400% or something else? And then on the other hand, there's the other side of the spectrum, which is we're starting people out at half a week's worth. And right now, even if LDN turnaround, like time from signing from notary signatures is like 2-3 days, that means that the client is pretty much like guaranteed to not have DataCap several times in their first few weeks of trying to use this process. And in general, as a community, we're trying to move towards like this more frictionless DataCap experience with like the amount of days that people wait around going closer and closer to zero, ideally. So that reduces the general onboarding UX pain of a client. And so obviously that's at odds. Like we have data, the data shows us that it takes a few days to get DataCap. So by giving a client a DataCap runway of only a few days, then like even mathematically, you reach the point where we're setting ourselves up for failure. Even with a 2-week example and with 75% as a threshold, that's 2.5 business days for notaries to sign the next tranche, which is like only happens in like the best case scenario. And so I think we need to do a little bit of thinking on how this scales more. Like it's a good blueprint, it's a good like initial system to iterate on, but it definitely does require iteration at the entry point stage and also at the top end of the spectrum. Like once a client has shown themselves to be trustworthy, how do we continue issuing DataCap in a friction-free way for them? So that was, I think, one of the bigger, more time sort of time-taking movies. I don't think it's the right word, but a discussion we spent a decent amount of time on in the previous governance call.
The other thing that most of the governance call was spent on the presentation from PlusKit of them showing their dashboard and talking through. So that was like a majority of it. But then, hearing from Faye as well on the large data set and sort of what has been working. And I think the big like flag here from my side is we're still seeing kind of disproportionate amounts of diligence happening on these large data sets compared to the direct notary activity, where there are definitely situations where clients are being asked more questions when working directly with a notary for a significantly smaller amount of DataCap than the questions they are being asked in the large data set process. And so my major concern with that is changing the upfront very first allocation size to be much larger you know, we've done a lot to increase the automation and have more tooling to get out of the way of the notaries being able to ask those questions. But for whatever reason, a lot of those questions are not being asked at all. So I'm just a little, you know, to use Carrie's favorite, I'm a little suspicious, a little sus as to, you know, upping that very first allocation with the amount of automation that we've put in place. You know, and maybe even a better pathway is having all enterprise clients go through a direct notary first and then put in a large data set. And maybe that's part of the diligence process. There's a lot of ways that we could slice it. I think the main point here is that the easiest, safest lift would be increasing the next allocation maximum. So it still ramps up. But right now we've only written rules to say first, second, third allocation at 200%. It'd be very easy to say your fourth allocation is 400% and your fifth allocation is 800%.
Yeah.
That would really get out of the way of people that are doing good deal making behavior. There may still be a pain point for those large clients to get started. There may be growing pains in them onboarding on the network. And, you know, perhaps that warrants a bigger discussion. But I think that, you know, it would be a safe enough proposal to make to the community governance and say, what does it look like to add 2 more allocation calculation steps?
Sure.
From a technical investment, that would be a pretty, as far as I know, that would be a relatively low lift technical challenge.
Okay, I just had one last question. What happens to issue 203? Will that come up in next year's log?
Which one was 203?
It's,
the FIP 203?
Removing the notary. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like, you know, you asked some questions. I think that the author of this has been pretty fast to reply. I also think that this thread has gotten pretty far away from the initial proposal and into a lot of like interesting brainstorming and conversation, but I don't know that this still stands as a valid proposal. So from a process standpoint, that's more of a Caitlin conversation as our sort of governance lead, as to say, like, do we just keep this open and keep having this conversation here, or do we move this from an open fit into some other forum? So I'm not really sure. I think for now, it definitely seems like there's good back and forth happening. We should just keep the issue open and keep discussing.
Okay, understand.
Awesome.
Maybe there's just one other thing. Is there a universal time so that you guys don't have to do 2 of these and we can join the one conversation? I know it's really hard to find it, but is there we don't mind doing early.
I have
is it just too hard?
I don't know a way to get all of the world onto a time zone that works.
Yeah, it's tough. I know that. Yeah. I just wonder if we don't mind doing, like, early is probably better than late. Like if it means it's a reasonable time, afternoon, evening for others, we could do early.
Yeah. Well, isn't this early for you right now? This is like 7 a.m. for you guys?
No, this is like half the day's gone, Galen. It's like 11:30. Like early, 5 or 6 in the morning.
Deep,
anyway,
what was that handy?
Well, I
Good.
think it would be great if we could all have one forum. And I know that we used to watch the recordings, and I know it's really challenging, but I think that's maybe it's extra effort on you guys. It would just be great to have that join the one conversation. But I know it's hard.
Yeah, because if it was, 4 hours earlier, it's still the middle of the night for most of our teams in Asia.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Just sort of-
Happy to hear a proposed time that would capture everyone's time zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Alright.
might be worth something we can survey on actually to see. Because attendance also has been dropping in this session, but increasing in the other session.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that's because of daylight savings time as well. That might be influencing it. So it might be worth tracking that a little bit to see. And if you're watching this recording and couldn't make it to one of the sessions, tell us why on Slack.
Mm.
There's also this, we create this issue in the repo in advance of these calls. So this is another place where agenda items and kind of proposed time changes, or, again, to Deep's point, if you're currently watching this recording, head over to issue 325 and let us know what time UTC would work better.
Yeah, for sure. I will do that.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and stop the recording and we can sally forth. Any other questions, comments from the community?